Guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm back in Bangalore and today I have another furniture upcycle video for you guys. This time I'm upcycling a glass topped coffee table. I'm going to be using a bone inlay stencil to give it a beautiful makeover. If you like traditional Jodhpuri Indian prints, you're going to love this one. Let's get to it.
So this is the coffee table that I have. It is at least around 10 to 15 years old. There is a thick glass top and there is also a glass underneath as the base, and the rest of it is solid wood. There is also some staining on the glass below. So as always, the first step to actually starting with our painting is to always prep our furniture. So prepping can involve sanding, it can involve wiping it off, or sometimes, in very rarely when you're using chalk paints, you can use a primer. But in my case, my furniture today, it just needed a good scrub. So I'm using some diluted soap liquid and just scrubbing the top of my glass, and then give it a good wiping and make sure that you don't have any of those dirt and debris left. I'm going to lift off this glass and separate it for now, and then on the base again I'm going to wipe it with some soapy water and then wipe it down with my cloth. So this is very important to make sure that your paint adheres to the structure. And lastly, I'm removing the base glass, and now I'm ready with the frame to start painting, which is the most exciting part of the project. The paint I'm using today is the Annie Sloan Napoleonic Blue. It's got a nice rich blue color, and I also have the Annie Sloan chalk paint brush here, but if you don't have one, don't worry. You can even use sponge. If you've seen my beginners video, I started painting just using a sponge. So don't worry if you don't have this, you can just use, a regular sponge as well. And you can see the color of this blue. It is beautiful and rich, and I thought it'll work really well with this pattern that I have in mind. So for the first coat, you don't want to add too much water. You can even add it straight out of the can, but I just find it easier to work with the chalk paint because it is really pigmented, the Annie Sloan paints, and it is also really thick. So adding just a teaspoon or two of water will just make it easier to kind of spread and work with the paint. But you don't really need to add too much. So this consistency looks good, and that's when I'm going to start painting. I'm going to paint in long strokes, and you will be able to see the amount of area I'm able to cover with just one dunking of the paint. So a little goes a long way. So you just want to basically cover the entire frame. Don't worry too much about the strokes or the coverage. You just want to cover the entire frame and make sure you're not missing out on any of the spots. Make sure you turn over the table a couple of angles. Make sure you cover all the areas which may not be visible. You can even cover the undersides which are not visible from the top. Just gives a better finish. You don't want the wood peeking through on certain angles, so make sure you get that covered. But other than that, that's all you need to do. And this, honestly, the painting bit is the most fun part for me. So I just took my time and really made sure I covered every inch of that wood. And what I loved about this color or the shade was that it gives such a beautiful coverage, and this is just with one coat of the paint. And previously I've used white or yellow and I've not got such beautiful coverage. I can even leave it at this one coat, but then I just thought it's a lot more durable if I add one more coat of paint. So I'm using the same paint. I'm just diluting it down a little bit more to make the paint thinner. And I'm going to go ahead and again follow the same process and make sure I cover the entire frame of the table in my second coat. Make sure you paint the second coat only after your first coat is completely dry. So that's one thing you need to note. And I've also explained all these little details and points in lot more detail in my beginners video on how to start painting with chalk paint. If you haven't seen that, make sure you check that out first. Now, once I'm done with my second coat, I'm going to show you how to paint glass, and for that I'm using the Annie Sloan Old Orchard shade, and it's a nice, beautiful cream off-white kind of color. And again, for the glass, you want to use paint straight out of the can. Do not add water. So the first coat goes on, you just want to cover the entire glass. You're not really worried about the strokes. Give long strokes. And the first coat, definitely you will see the glass come through, but don't worry about it. You're kind of just providing this one layer of friction. When you apply your second coat, it's going to stick on to the first coat, and it's going to not, it's not going to scratch off or peel off, which happens maybe with other chalk paints. And that's why I love the Annie Sloan chalk paint so much. Like you can see, this is after the first coat. It's completely dry now, and I'm going to move on to my second coat. Now, second coat, you can see the difference it is, right? So now when I'm applying my second coat, it's completely giving me that coverage, and it's adhering really well to that first coat of paint. And this is what it looks like if you try to shoot a hand paint with one hand. So I'm sorry about the clumsy painting, but make sure you give nice, beautiful long strokes. I personally love this combination of the blue and the off-white, but as I always say, it's up to you, like which colors you want to play with. Annie Sloan has a lot of wide range of colors. You can choose what colors you want to work with. So this is how my base plate looks after I've painted it, and once it's dry, you can see that it's completely evened out. Now I'm going to move to my top glass plate, and we're going to follow the exact same process. You're going to give the first coat of the blue paint, and then followed by, once it's completely dry, then you're going to go ahead and give it the second coat. And the blue color, as I mentioned earlier, it gives a much better coverage than the white, but still make sure you give it that two coats. It's really going to help provide that durability and that strength to your piece. So after two coats, this is how it looks. It may look a little patchy at this point, but once it dries, it's going to even out, so don't worry about that. So this is how it looks once it's dry. It's kind of evened out. There is still a slightly slightly moist patches. So now let's come to the most exciting part, is the stenciling. And I have the Annie Sloan Bone inlay stencils. The stencils are of beautiful quality. They are pretty sturdy. So even though they mention that you need to tape your stencils to the work area before you use them, I really did not have to, because they were pretty sturdy and they did not easily move around. So before I started, I took a few measurements just to get a feel of how the patterns are going to look, what is the space I require, just to get an overall feel of the design. So once I've kind of worked out where I want to place it, you can even stencil using a pencil and see and make sure your positioning is right, and then go ahead and start your stenciling. I'm using a stenciling brush here. And you need to be applying this paint in a stippling motion, or you can say in a kind of dabbing motion, so that you don't have any excess paint spill out, and that can kind of not give you that crisp borders for your stencils. So in stenciling, actually there's only few things that you want to take care of. That is, firstly, do not add water to your paint. You need to use thick paint. Use less paint. So take a little paint, dab it out on a surface, and then use it on your stencils, because excess paint can cause your stencils to patterns to bleed out of the stencil. So make sure you're using just enough paint, and also make sure when you're using stencils over existing patterns, make sure your patterns are dry before you move on and stencil. So just these simple steps that you need to kind of take care of before you have a perfect design. So just to get a closer view, this is the kind of motion that you want to do. I'm just showing it really slowly so that you can see it clearly, but make sure you cover the borders really clearly, so that your designs are more crisp and they stand out really well. So basically I first did my corners and then I'm doing these sides. So depending on, after I do one side, then I wait for that to dry and then I move on. While that is drying, I move, I work on my other side. And the best thing about chalk paint again is you can see here I've completely, gone off road and kind of, overlaid with another pattern. So I can just use some of my blue paint and I'm using a small paintbrush and I'm just correcting it. I'm just painting over it, and you just need to wait for that to dry and then it's as good as, starting over. So it's really easy to kind of, do any kind of corrections. And this stencil set that comes, it has a couple of designs, so you can choose it, how you want to kind of pattern your design. And I'm just using, this pattern over here to the four corners. And just kind of, I didn't really honestly have anything in my mind. I'm just doing it as it comes for me. And this beautiful pattern, I'm going to kind of put it in the center, again following the same methods. And the borders over here, I've used this pattern over here, and I'm going to show you how I'm going to do this to the top. And because I want it to kind of be a mirror image, I'm going to flip the fence stencil over and then use it. So when you flip it, you need to obviously make sure that, the underside which you were working with is clean or dry before you kind of flip it over. And I'm just leaving that space so that I can add in, the extra patterns while they are drying. So these kind of simple things you need to kind of make sure that you have covered. And yeah, I'm just going to complete this design. And while that is drying, I'm just kind of working out how I want my center design to look, and I'm just taking a few measurements to make sure that I'm getting the center of my table. So with this kind of pattern, it's really pretty if you even, completely cover your table with the pattern. It gives that really beautiful Rajasthani that feel and look to your furniture. But I wanted to keep it, kind of not completely covered, and I just wanted to do a border and then give it a center design. So that's the kind of design I went for. But again, it's totally up to you how you want to kind of design your piece. And you just need a little patience, and that is something is very key when you're working with chalk paint, I think, because even though it's easy, if you're you really need to take time to work with your paint and give your paint enough time to dry between coats. So take those small things into account. If you do those, it's really easy to kind of work with chalk paint. And I'm just falling short of the furniture that I have at home right now to kind of refurbish. And tada, that is kind of the last stencil that I needed. And I'm just using this tiny brush with again a little bit of blue, and I'm just doing a little bit of corrections here and there. Some of the paints that's kind of splattered on the side, or some stencils which have moved, so I'm just doing those tiny corrections. And then I'm good to go. So that's done with my painting basically. And now the next thing and very important thing is you need to protect your chalk painted furniture. So I'm using the wax here for protecting my wooden frame. And I have my Annie Sloan clear wax here, and I also have an Annie Sloan wax brush. If you don't have a wax brush, you can use any lint-free cloth or even any socks. I've showed this previously, that's what I've used. But the waxing brush does make it a lot easier, but really it's not a mandate. You can work with what you have. And when you're waxing, make sure you're kind of working with the wax and pushing it into your paint so that it kind of helps protect your piece very well. And you don't need to use a lot. You need to kind of work with the wax and kind of push it into the paint and remove the excess wax from the furniture. And the thing about using wax is great, it provides a beautiful finish to your furniture. But if you're looking for more durability, and if you're looking for a place which is going to have a lot of, it's going to be used very widely, like the top of my table, then you want to use lacquer. And here, so for the top of my table, I'm using lacquer, which is of clear matte, again from Annie Sloan. And I will be using this flat brush to apply my lacquer to the table. When working with lacquer, you need to be a little fast because it sets pretty easily, and make sure again you're working on a clean surface. Wipe it off before you start working with your lacquer. And you can see here you need to work a little fast, and you need to be applying your lacquer in long strokes, and you don't want to be going over it multiple times. So do that quick one stroke, and once it dries, don't worry, you can even apply multiple coats of your lacquer just to give it that extra durability, which I will be doing for the since at least from the top of my table. And make sure you don't miss out on the sides of the table as well. So once I've applied my lacquer, it's looking like this, really pretty, really happy me. And the last thing that I need to do is I've applied lacquer to the base of my, the base plate as well. And I'm just going to insert this into my table once it's ready and dry. And that is my finished table. And I am loving it, absolutely loving it. It's really pretty. I know I'm going to be getting a lot of questions on where I actually picked up this piece from.
One of the best things about chalk paint is how forgiving it is. You can paint over to make any corrections, you can redo a color if you didn't like it, or you can even upcycle it after a couple of years. Just go ahead and paint over it and you'll have another piece. Which is why you shouldn't be scared of upcycling your furniture if you haven't already tried. With that, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Make sure you subscribe to my channel. I'll see you again next week with a new video. Till then, take care. It's me, Dhivya, signing out.
Hey guys, welcome to my channel.